All right. Well, again, good morning. We are officially starting the 2025 Summer Symposium Works in Progress, and our first panel is a good one. And so we are going to turn it over to our panelists. I am going to allow Rohan to um, go third. So we'll start with Raedorah and then Ali and then Rohan. And we will go ahead on and get started by you introducing yourself, a little bit about the work that you do, and then you have your presentation. So Dr. Stewart, you up?
Greetings, friends. I am Reverend Dr. Raedorah Stewart. My location academically is as a womanist scholar, preacher, and poet. I serve both in the academy at Wesley Theological Seminary as the director of the Writing Center, where I teach writing for ministry as well as the more um, basic of writing for seminarians. And that's where I really focus a lot on the communication of writing and expressing in an academic language that bridges the gap between the academy and the congregation. So my interests include broadly and largely language and the importance of language as nomo, as the power to transmit the intent of the Spirit, the presence of the Spirit, as well as a linguistic tool. And so I offered this presentation, and I'm going to set my timer so that I can stay on task. I meant to do this before I came on. Just give me 1 second. Um, so my interest is how the power of words shaped our faith, as well as our social and political consciousness. So when I chose the title of this work and this project, God is a Woman, I intentionally made it a definitive statement as opposed to suggestive, such as, or inquisitive, such as, is God a woman or can God be a woman? But definitively so, God is a woman. And that is to move us from the nuanced inclusivity around inclusive language and generalized conversation to a liberating language in congregational rhetoric. Thank you, brother, for the invitation as well as the platform. So initially, my research questions are these three. How do religious leaders strategically employ gendered language to maintain doctrinal authenticity while fostering inclusive worship environments? I am particularly, I'm going to pause here to say, if there is someone who requires an ADA accommodation about description or reading the slides more fully, just put it in the chat and I will certainly do so. The second research question that I initially posed was, what rhetorical strategies emerge when congregations attempt to balance scriptural fidelity with progressive gender theology? My third initial, and I'm noting initial research question, was, how does the metaphorical framing of divine femininity function as both a theological statement and a community identity marker? And so I stressed that these were my initial inquisitions, because once I really looked back at my abstract and began to structure a more formal peer review paper, I realized that my real question is, how do religious leaders strategically employ gendered language to transform, not to merely maintain, doctrine? How do we transform doctrinal function as opposed to, if you will, simply maintain doctrinal authenticity? Because our authenticity, our doctrinal authenticity perhaps could stand some transformation, because as we have heard in the United Methodist Church, God is still speaking. So I contend that God said a lot in the beginning, but indeed God is still speaking. So I think it is the work of the linguists to inform, to transform our doctrinal function as opposed to merely maintain a doctrinal authenticity. And then the second tweaking that I needed to do was the research question: what rhetorical strategies emerge when congregations not merely attempt to balance scriptural fidelity, but commit to balance scriptural fidelity? If this seems like splitting hairs, I hope I transform your understanding that this work has to find its place in transformation and liberation, but also in something more than just talking about it, but committing to action in using the inclusive language and the transformational power of an inclusive language in our sacred conversations and sacred text. How does the metaphorical framing of divine femininity again function as both a theological statement and a community identity marker? The methodology, if you will, I approach it using critical discourse analysis, and that is just our basic examining current text and however the conversation comes from that interdisciplinary feed into this research. I lean heavily on ethnographic observations as well as rhetorical criticism, particularly looking at the emergence of womanist theology, feminist theology, and Black liberation theology as rhetorical critiques. My data sources are largely sermon transcripts, and whether it's live in person or from YouTube, liturgical materials, and I'll speak more of that and my contribution to this a little bit later, and congregational discussions. I have not moved into developing a survey for the congregations, nor presenting it to congregations to take, especially those that I intend to use as part of my development of the methodology. The great scale is to include 12 progressive faith communities, but I will start in the concentric circles of those to which I have immediate and intimate access. First would be with Covenant Baptist United Church of Christ, where I have a male pastor, and he has a very interesting journey moving into a progressive theology. And then the Community Church DC with the female pastor who is a queer identified female. And then Empowerment Temple, which is one of the longer standing and established queer led congregations, but that is more non-denominational as opposed to mainline denomination of the other two. And so when I look at diverse denominational backgrounds, I will include those to which I have ordination as well as employments, because that gives me an immediate base on which to look for this work and to do this work. And that would be American Baptist USA, Presbyterian USA, and the United Methodist Seminary conversations. Now, the primary rhetorical strategies, I looked at the strategic ambiguity of language And I'm going to say a little bit more about that. The explicit reclamation of this gendered language and hybrid approaches to committing to and implementing these strategies. When I talk about primary rhetorical strategies around strategic ambiguity, I am talking about grammatical fluidity, where there is within a published text the alternating of the male and female gendering, not only of God, but the imagery of God, but also the language and the naming of God as the binary he and she. Then I look at neutered grammar, where particularly in Hebrew texts and Sanskrit texts and other sacred texts, the language is there. The pronouns are not neutered. They are not male or female or other. It is an all-inclusive personhood or beinghood. And then I must take advantage and take a closer look at the poetic metaphor that allows for a strategic ambiguity to where it is, I think, poets tend to embody more spirit as opposed to gender. The explicit reclamation I take from womanist works, feminist work, and Jewish works. For instance, I do a lot of womanist work on the womb god, such as language around birthing and the Shekinah, or I mean the Shaddai as the multi-breasted God. Then we look at the feminist explicit reclamation, particularly instead of the father-son dynamic, it's the Sophia child dynamic, and they lean heavily into wisdom and proverbs to develop that theology. And then finally, a Jewish text in which the Shekinah is explicitly feminine, but that language is not included in particularly Protestant or a Christian language. And then the hybrid approaches would be gradual introduction of the language through preaching and teaching and music, in using and identifying multiple versions of key text, and as well as the intentionality of when you are in mixed gender gatherings or solo gender gatherings, that you use the gender of God that reflects the gathering. Key insights. The first insight that I have is that this commitment must come around gradual evolution, and that is making gradual linguistic shifts versus an abrupt, you're going to say this, you're going to do this, we're going to believe this. I'm not looking for an abrupt theological departure or a rhetorical departure, but more of a gradual linguistic shift, as if we are relearning or learning a language, a new nomo, and learning the vocabulary as a child in learning all of the nuanced language, the nuanced linguistic shifts. We want the congregations to evolve into this and to maintain an institutional identity. And that comes, I think, through a gradual evolution rather than through some dictation or mandate. The dual function, again, as I go back, is for the preservation and transformation of this sacred language, as well as introducing new language that transforms, not merely maintains, our doctrinal and belief systems. And it's that dance where we negotiate tradition and progress. And we do that. For many of us, we code switch, but more than anything, we negotiate the space around tradition and progress. And finally, the intent is that there becomes a community identity that values gender and spirituality, and that we are the voices that create new forms of a collective identity, particularly, and my work is particularly focused on African American, African diasporic congregations. And as I wrap this up, the implications and future directions practically for its congregational leadership, inclusive worship design, community dialogue facilitation. The academic contributions will be introducing a rhetorical analysis framework, gender theological scholarship, and institutional change studies, moving more than just from inclusive language generalized, but using texts that are particularly and especially explicitly gendered. So, the work in progress, in a nutshell, is understanding how congregations manage theological evolution through sacred rhetoric, and the work that we do here. One of the thoughts that emerged for me is that religious rhetoric transcends common communication. And that's one of the reasons I love this initiative by Brother Andre. It describes the deep relationship between the divine and the designed. And the design, by that I mean the Imago Dei, those who are made in that which is made in the image of God. So religious rhetoric transcends common communication. It describes the deep relationship between the divine and the designed. My contribution to this work is a book that is on the precipice of being released by Whiff and Stock. It's Hear the Spirit, Ritual Poems and Radical Litanies. And in this work, you will hear a lot of this nuanced language that is intentional, that has been used in my public rhetoric, whether at the Covenant Church when I'm called to preach in other congregations, as well as in my teaching at the seminary. And I'm grateful that the endorsers of this particular work, there are others, but initially were Dr. Jeremiah A. Wright Jr. and Dr. Anthony Reddy. And if you'd like to be in contact with me, that's my contact information, and I look forward to hearing from you. If you would like to be on the mailing list for the book release, and opportunities to come and share, do workshops around the radical poems and ritual poems and radical litanies that really develop more of this project and of this work, just send it to me at Raedorah@gmail.com. Thank you so much for this opportunity to present and to be a part of this gathering.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Awesome presentation, awesome work in progress.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Next up is Alex.
Okay. Just a second.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay. Okay, I hope that worked. All right. Let me get my terrible. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Ali Chu. I'm a first year writing lecturer, so really we don't get to do any scholarship, you're just teaching all the time. So this is really exciting for me to return to this project. I started drafting it like 8 years ago, and so this call to do works in progress really kicked my butt to revisit the project. It's called Holy Anger and Alternative Vision, Rereading, I Have a Dream. Okay, so first I'm going to talk rhetoric and then situate I Have a Dream in the African American prophetic tradition. I will analyze the speech a little bit, and then I'm going to talk implications for education. Okay, so first, rhetorical theory of holy anger. I was very interested in the rhetoric of anger, and the term righteous indignation or righteous anger, I decided to name as a rhetorical concept, holy anger, which I define as anger felt and expressed in response to injustice. Paulo Freire in Pedagogy of Freedom calls it a legitimate sense of anger, and he uses an example, Jesus' cleansing of the temple, anger in response to injustice, people taking advantage of the poor. And theologian Johnny Bernard Hill has this term prophetic rage, which he says is theological praxis. So not just an emotion that's felt, but belief and action intertwined. Okay. Now, some rhetoric stuff. Aristotle's like, yes, we should feel anger in response to wrongs committed against us, but there is an appropriate way to express anger to be rhetorically effective. And now, today, with the liberal enlightenment default in our public sphere, calm speech with controlled emotions is the most rhetorically effective speech, or is considered to be, uh, which, I don't know, I've been rethinking this lately because there are exceptions to this. I'm rethinking this in the age of Trump because I want to differentiate holy anger from things like white rage or uh, performative moral outrage. Those things are a little bit different, but like who's allowed to express anger publicly? That has to do with I'll just quote right here. I have that Thomas West says the anger of the marginalized rhetor is routinely dismissed and used to discredit them as a speaker. So that's a challenge. And we see MLK confront that in how he constructed I Have a Dream. Okay, holy anger as a disruptive creative power. Bell Hooks says the public pathologization of anger is an act of racism, and Black rage can express itself in ways that lead to creative, hold on, to constructive empowerment. So she's like, hey, that's not just um, destroying. Anger's not just destroying stuff. It can be constructive, healing, clarifying. And then political scientist William Sokolov, in studying Frederick Douglass, he defines anger as a dialectical political emotion that emerges from abuse, triggers reflection, and leads to creative responses to political oppression. So this idea that it starts internally and then goes external as a public incendiary device to then become a collective emotion. When we talk about I Have a Dream, I want to look at how it's like two stages to the processing of anger, or that's how I'm applying Sokolov's idea is first you process it in the individual level and then on the collective level. Okay, and the relationship between holy anger and what I'm terming alternative vision. Audre Lorde says that anger can be used in the service of, hold on, in the service of our vision and our future. And she says, focused with precision, it can become a powerful source of energy serving progress and change, causing a basic alteration in those assumptions underlining our lives. I connect this to Dr. King's concept of creative maladjustment, this idea that we are always dissatisfied with how things are, and therefore we see how things could be. Okay, so in summary, I theorize holy anger as an indispensable emotion in recognizing and responding to injustice, a positive emotion to be fully felt and processed on the individual and collective levels, and a useful rhetorical tool with the potential to disrupt, which leads us into new ways of seeing and acting, specifically toward goals of justice. Okay, I could say a lot about African American prophetic tradition, but I just want to talk about how holy anger as a rhetorical tool has been a part of the tradition since its beginnings, and I wanted to just highlight a few texts that I think employ holy anger. And so, why did I pick I Have a Dream? When I said I wanted to study anger, and a lot of people are like, you picked I Have a Dream, but I did because I just noticed how angry of a speech it is, and it's worth paying attention to. So I ask, how does I Have a Dream use holy anger to critique the existing social order and invite the audience into an experience of anger, and then call on them to imagine and act on a vision of transformation? Okay, now into the speech itself. In this analysis, I've divided the speech into 6 parts, which I'm going to go through one by one. And I just want to note that really half the speech is dedicated to, or is driven by anger, while the second half is dedicated to setting up the vision and presenting the vision. Okay, so first, the speech begins with angry energy that 100 years later, repetition really creates a momentum of anger. The metaphors show different aspects of the problem that we're angry about. And the language is very demanding, indignant, and confrontational in its anger. Okay, next, I think that confrontational anger increases because he starts to use prophetic warning and to his audience, especially his white audience, is like, we're just, this change is gradual, right? And he's like, no, you're going to go through a rude awakening. And these natural disaster images are quite terrifying, quite biblical. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation. So there's some showing here of like anger is destructive, but toward a constructive purpose until the bright day of justice emerges. And there's a few other images here, bright day of justice. There's some others that I didn't put on this slide that he's already starting to introduce what America could be and what it could look like. But most of that's saved for the end of the speech. Okay, next, collective processing. So I said earlier how um, there's this speech is inviting people to experience anger together. I want to point out that Dr. King does not locate negative destruction in anger itself, but in what he says, drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. So he's like, hey, we're angry. I've already established that our cause is aligned, African American has aligned with the cause of justice. And now we're going to use that anger, channel that anger toward justice by applying soul force. Okay, next is turning his attention to his audience of allies at the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. About half the audience was white people. And so our white brothers, these appeals to interdependence, their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. This is where a second we gets introduced into the speech because up until now, the we is African Americans, and now it can also include allies. We cannot walk alone. All right, so now when we get another like build-in repetition to highlight the problems of how slavery is still existing, the social, racial, economic marginalization of Black people is still going on. We can never be satisfied. We are creatively maladjusted. We don't like this. This we is African Americans, but now, as you can see, the allies are invited into this anger. No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. So there's that prophetic Book of Amos thing going on again with the abundant energy of anger that moves toward justice. Okay, and then finally, I have a dream. Uh, Here is just everyone remembers this because the images again are so striking. It spans the geography of the United States, and then incorporated into that geography is this biblical imagery, the kingdom of God becoming a reality, the jingling discords of our nation transformed into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. So it's an expansive vision of what could be and the future that is possible if we act upon this anger right now. Okay, so in conclusion, through this expression of holy anger, Dr. King expressed love for people and a more just society. He facilitates individual and collective experiences of anger that bring his audience to work together to enact an alternative vision by organized action for racial justice. Okay, and this part is the least developed part of my project, but I just wanted to put forth some principles, and again, I'm drawing a lot from Pedagogy of Freedom. Freire says the kind of education that does not recognize the right to express appropriate anger against injustice fails to see the educational role implicit in the expression of these feelings, or reframing anger as perhaps the only rational response to injustice. And what does that mean in the classroom? Part of that for me is an embodied experience of education that considers intellect and emotion in relation to each other, making room in the classroom for processing, reflecting, and expressing holy anger. And then by studying holy anger, such as in texts like this, building a rhetorical toolkit for civic engagement. Okay, that's the end. I hope I was in the time limit and that I didn't talk too fast. But thank you for listening to this presentation and being my community. And thank you to Dr. Whitney Douglas here at Boise State and Dr. Derek Hanley at University of Wisconsin. So I wrote that wrong. University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry. I gotta fix that for their
Okay.
guidance and support in this project. And that's everything. Oh,
No. Thank you. Thank you.
thank you.
And I think you did a wonderful job. So do
Thank
not.
you so much.
Thank you. All right. Next up is Rohan. There he is.
Thank you so much for the privilege and honor to share significant, great presentations by Ali and Dr. Stewart. Totally appreciate it. Dr. Johnson, thank you so much for having me again. I'm excited to be back. And so what I wanted to kind of present as it is in his work, I don't necessarily have a presentation as our wonderful panelists had before. But hopefully you can also hear my heart in at least what I'm trying to project. I wanted to kind of share this early articulation of my project titled Reclaiming the Pulpit, Rhetorical Resistance and Epistemic Recovery in the Black Pentecostal Sermons. This work emerges at the intersection of rhetoric, theology, and Black studies, particularly as it concerns the epistemological dimensions of preaching within the Black Pentecostal traditions. And that's where I come out of from. And so my core proposition is this. Black Pentecostal preaching is not merely proclamation. It is rhetorical active resistance and epistemological intervention and a site of ancestral and spirit-infused memory. The pulpit in this tradition does not only speak about God or Black life, it speaks from within a long history of survival, struggle, and sacred improvisation. It is a space where knowledge deemed illegitimate by dominant systems is not only asserted, but embodied, performed, and believed. And to begin, I want to foreground a quote from a womanist ethicist by the name of Katie Cannon, who reminds us, and I quote, the preacher in the Black church is more than a communicator. She or he is a vessel of counter memory, a site of survival. And end quote. And so this framing is crucial to how I approach Black Pentecostal pulpit, not merely as a religious platform, but as what I call a subaltern epistemic site, where silence or suppressed ways of knowing are retrieved, revoiced, and reaffirmed. It is the location where the spirit collaborates with the body, history speaks through rhythm, and testimony becomes theory. Some of the research questions and objectives that I'm trying to animate are central, or at least cemented in these central questions, these three such central questions. Number one, how does Black Pentecostal preaching reclaim and transmit racialized knowledge that has been historically marginalized or dismissed by Enlightenment rationalism? Number two, in what ways does the sermonic event function as both theological and epistemological intervention beyond doctrine before delivery? And lastly, but not least, and how might rhetorical analysis of these sermons offer insight into broader decolonial epistemic project? And so the theological grounding is centered on decolonizing knowledge from the pulpit. And so to approach these questions, I draw from multiple intersecting frameworks. For example, decolonial theory, particularly the work of Walter of Linda Smith, who helps interrogate how knowledge has been constructed and policed through colonial modernity. Secondly, Black feminist thought, especially from thinkers from Bell Hooks, Cheryl Gaux, Dolores Williams, who challenges who gets to speak and what counts as valid knowledge. And then lastly, rhetorical theory, drawn from Geneva Smitherman, Keith Gilliard, who affirms Black speech as a site of political and cultural agency. And importantly, Black theological pneumatological sources, including James Cone, Ashen Crawley, Estralda Alexander, who help frame the theological stakes of spirit-embodied proclamation. Together, these voices help me name and develop what I call the epistemic rupture, moments within Black Pentecostal sermons that actively disrupt colonial categories of knowing and offer an alternative spirit-anchored epistemology. The methodology for this particular project is I take on a rhetorical critical approach. Methodologically, this project employs a rhetorical criticism with an emphasis on sermonic form, performance, and context. I engage in close textual and performative analysis of sermons from Afro-Caribbean and Afro-American Pentecostal preachers, both prominent figures and local voices that are often overlooked in academic discourse. My approach is intentionally expansive and attuned to the lived texture of the preaching moment. So what I plan on doing, or what have I also been doing, is number one, I analyze the structure of the sermon, the way it frames theology, deploys biblical narrative, and navigates sacred time. Number two, I attend to performance, the preacher's voice, or rather use of voice, breath, rhythm, and gestures as theological tools and rhetorical strategies. Thirdly, I situate each sermonic moment within its communal context, recognizing that the sermon is never solitary, but co-constructed through call and response, collective memory, and spirit-led improvisation. And lastly, I listen for ancestral echoes, right? Those invocations of past struggles, survival, and spiritual knowing, passed down through generations, often coded through idiom, tone, and testimony. And as a conclusion, this methodology not only treats sermons as texts to be interpreted, but as events to be felt, witnessed, and discerned, where theology and epistemology meet in the heart of spirit-led utterance. I draw upon certain case examples, and which I refer to as moments of, as I mentioned before, epistemic rupture. So, for example, I'll just name two for the sake of time. Bishop Noel Jones, his sermon, The Power of the Made-Up Mind. In a climatic moment of the sermon, Jones makes this following remark, and I quote, "I cannot explain it all, but I know God is real because I felt him in my bones," end quote. And so this moment foregrounds experience as authoritative knowledge, a radical departure from Enlightenment epistemologies that privilege reason over effect. Where we see here is epistemic rupture, right? Knowing the body, or knowing through the body, through encounter, through what Crawley calls Black Pentecostal breath. Second particular example is from evangelist Jackie McCulloch in her sermon, This Is That. Drawn from Acts 2, McCulloch weaves together Pentecost with the transatlantic slave trade. Her sermon moves from glossolalia to historical memory, declaring, and I quote, "This Holy Ghost is the same one that kept our mothers through the cotton fields, the same that gave us language when they tried to take it away," end quote. Here, McCulloch performs transgenerational epistemology, as I refer to, which is a retrieval of erased knowledge, meditated through spirit and communal memory. And her preaching decolonizes time, collapsing biblical, historical, and contemporary realities into a single kairotic moment. I also, draw upon local Afro-Caribbean pastors as well too, and kind of do the same sort of process in analyzing their sermons. Just before I wrap it up here, my preliminary findings within this particular project so far, my analysis suggests that Black Pentecostal preaching performs several epistemic functions. Number one, it displaces Western dualisms, right? Such as spirit, body, mind, emotion, reasons, and faith. Number two, it recovers erased memories, historical, spiritual, and ancestral. Thirdly, it centers the spirit as pedagogue, right? A living teacher and an agent of divine disruption. And fourthly, it affirms the validity of other ways of knowing through feeling, through sound, through movement, through the shout. And so these findings are given shape to the broader concept of epistemic rupture, a rhetorical practice that seeks to tear open space for Afro-diasporic and spirit-centered knowing within contexts that have historically rendered those knowledges invisible. What are I guess, the present contributions and next steps for this project? This project contributes to the ongoing conversations in the rhetoric and homiletics by treating preaching not simply as religious expression, but as a form of critical discourse and an embodied rhetoric that both constructs and contests meaning. Secondly, religious studies by examining Black Pentecostalism not merely as faith tradition, but as an epistemic tradition, a living archive, an alternative knowledge production rooted in spirit, memory, and testimony. And then lastly, one of thus dearest to my heart, as decolonial theory, by centering lived theology that emerges from below, from the spirit, and from the margins, challenging dominant narratives about what counts as legitimate knowledge and who is authorized to speak it. And so moving forward, my next steps involve continued sermon analysis across diasporic Pentecostal contexts, interviews with preachers about their theological formation and homiletical practice, and deeper engagement with performance theory to map how preaching bodies carry and transmit epistemic weight. Ultimately, this work seeks to illuminate, how spirit-led rhetoric participates in broader projects of decolonial knowledge recovery and cultural resistance. And so therefore, in conclusion, my concern is, again, to reclaim the pulpit. And I want to close with a reflection that summarizes the heart of this work. We preach because we remember. We shout because we refuse to forget. The Black Pentecostal pulpit is a place of remembering, of recovering what was erased, revoicing what was silenced, and reclaiming what was denied. It is, I contend, one of the most vibrant and underexplored sites of rhetorical resistance and epistemic recovery in the Black tradition. Thank you for listening, and certainly welcome your feedback and dialogue.
All right. I tell you, didn't I tell you that this was going to be a great panel? I knew it. Yep. So we want to open up now for Q&A. And if there is anyone that has a comment or a question, please share it now. You can also share in the chat as well. I'm going to check that as well. But Q&A time. Not everybody at once now.
Oh, I had my hand
go ahead.
raised.
Oh, go. I see you now. Go ahead, Raedorah.
You know, I'm an old Baptist. I believe in.
That's right.
So my what a wonderful conversation, and I'm excited to bring into conversation more with Ali and with Rohan. Ali, one of the things that stands out for me in your presentation is that the dominant culture has advanced the knowledge that King was a pacifist, but we are missing that he was angry, and that pacifism does not negate anger, and definitely holy rage and black rage and black anger. I just love that. And I'm wondering if there is a place where you can make that explicit statement. I'm not even sure where it would land, but if I tell you, that is what continually rose for me. And the second, there's a saying that good meat makes its own gravy. So the gravy for me is that your presentation disembowels the angry Black woman motif as pejorative, and is making me think, how do I now take some of your good meat and use it as a conversation around disemboweling this this angry Black woman motif as something that we should speak against, stand against, seek to avoid, but instead say, oh no, this is holy work. So I thank you for your presentation. And while I have the floor, Brother Rohan, a couple of things. Your presentation brings to mind this current conversation that's happening between gospel purists or gospel adherents and the Maverick and CCM musicology that is problematic on not only from instances where there has been plagiarism of context, arrangements, and performance, but also just around how the introduction of that, what's that little machine they all use as the background music, and then bringing in this very bucolic type of theology. So that was very important to me and made me hear more of language I could use as I stand against take my position in that conversation. I love that testimony becomes theory. Love it. And this is a correction from an auntie, and that is that Gilkes and Williams identify as womanist. They do not identify as feminist. And there is the importance of nuanced identity, Black feminist, womanist, even though we are closely akin, understand that those two are a part of the motherhood of womanist theology and womanism in religious and rhetorical context. And so I hope you honor that nuance. Again, my being hung up on the language and how important that language is, particularly in the richness and wealth that your work presents to us. Thank you both for allowing me the opportunity to be in conversation with you.
Thank you. And we will give both Ali and Rohan a chance to respond. Ali?
Thank you, Raedorah, for I actually really struggle with that because when I presented an earlier version of this, I got some audience response being like, "Oh, hey, so are you like saying that that nonviolence is like the only way?" Um, and things like that I didn't want to write in such a way that sounded like I was policing expressions of anger by studying this speech. So I just love how you who put it for me, and I will be on that because I do think that section of speech where he's like, "Oh, but hey, you guys, wait a minute," like that can often be appropriated by people to be saying like, "Oh, hey, there's certain ways you should be expressing your anger that if you want to be effective," which I don't think is what Dr. King would was about when he said that. Okay. And then oh yes, and the angry Black woman, I really thank you because for that as well, because an earlier version of this I also was like I had a whole section on Black Lives Matter. And then I sort of so that was more women's rhetoric centered. And then at a certain point, I wanted to just I thought I was doing too much and I wanted to just focus on one thing. So I changed it. But however, I can maybe in like a concluding little section or discussion talk about, highlight women or like I looked into the process of composing I Have a Dream, and it was really like a bunch of men working together on drafting it alongside Dr. King. And so I think it's which is cool, there's collective anger going on there, but to make sure that Black women, and I have bell hooks and Audre Lorde theorizing anger, so I don't want to lose that, and I'm going to think about how to do that. So anyway, thanks so much. I'll stop talking.
Rohan?
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Stewart, no, thank you for that modification. I certainly will make that amendment to my work. I definitely appreciate that insight on Gilkes and Williams. I appreciate that. And you're absolutely correct. One of the reasons why I messaged in the chat, I wanted to reach out to you because overall, my dissertation I'm working on at this moment is concerned about postmodernity and the reclamation of racialized knowledge and epistemological shifts in subaltern decolonial epistemology since the Enlightenment. And much of your presentation and the rhetoric that you offer, especially in the areas that I sort of focus on the epistemological aspect of how theology is a major tool in the ecosystem of how we understand and what we know about what we know about race. Much of your presentation really really took to me, and would love to plug and explore that further to see how that can help process my thoughts on this topic. So I definitely certainly appreciate your work, and would love to explore it and have that conversation later.
All right. Anyone else? Let's jump in. And panelists, you can ask questions of each other as well.
Hey,
Dr. Gould, go ahead.
Yeah, forgive me for being off screen. I'm in and out today. But anyway, thank you all. This is just really wonderful. Ali, I also just wanted to note, in you just and completely agree with Dr. Stewart around the like I was like, man, when you just anger and the I have a dream speech, I was like, yes. Like disrupting that kind of binary construct of uh you can be a pacifist, but you're not angry, right? Like that just really sat with me. But I also just wanted to note in your remarks that you just made, you talked about all of the men that were constructing this. It was really the rhetoric of Dr. Prathia Hall that actually gives the I Have a Dream as even a title. Dr. King is in a mass meeting with her, and she keeps talking about her vision, an alternative vision of where they were in that moment. And she repeated multiple times, I have a dream. So I just wanted to offer that in addition to what you may have. It was not just the boys, it's only that the boys get quoted and noted in history. So the womaness in me would not let that go. So thanks.
Wow, I have more research to do. Thank you so much for pointing me in that direction, Cassandra. Dang.
And also, Ali, you may not need to expand your project from where you are framing it now. With every good film, something is left on the director's cutting room floor. But that fodder ends up being sequel. It ends up being another project. It ends up being a prequel. When I talk to my dissertation clients and they have to cut out something, I say, but this is an article that's a standalone in another voice, in another platform. Don't throw away in your revision, because that just means that that is something else that's being birthed within. So hang on to it, and imagine that it lives somewhere else.
Right.
And thank you, Dr. Gould.
Yep. And Ali, there are some comments in the chat. I know I put out a couple since Dr. Gould mentioned Prathia Hall. I just got a quick link for you to look at that. And then Brittany Cooper's work on eloquent rage is, if you're going to be talking about holy rage, you might want to look at that as well. I think Dr. McNeil had his hand up.
I did, and I put my comment in the
Okay.
chat. It kind of leaned on what Cassandra said about that speech, because if memory serves me correctly, I don't think the original name of the speech was "I Have a Dream." Yes, there it is right there. So yeah, I just, just because that rhetorical piece is what stuck. And it made me even think about Rohan and, the sermonic discourse. Uh, we have certain things that, through discourse, it just sticks. And that was one thing that stuck. So just wanted to make note of that.
And that, of course, was whispered to him by, was it Mahalia or someone while he was speaking?
Yep.
Tell him about the dream, Martin. So that, I mean, you're talking about, yeah, like you said, merging in Rohan's piece, you're talking about the extemporaneous preaching tradition within the Black church, where just, hey, we can just move away from the text, so to speak, and allow the Spirit to lead. That's something as well too. Yeah. Let's see. Did anybody else have their hand up? Any other comments? Ali, I do have one question for you, just out of curiosity, because I think your project is a great one, and bringing in what Dr. Stewart had mentioned about, if you are a student of mine, I tell you that all the time, right? You always want to build on your work. Yeah. So, leave some stuff away and you can come back and build on it. Have you read any of some of the speeches from the later king, 67, 68, those type of speeches? And I'll tell you why I'm asking in a minute.
And yeah, no, I haven't. I heard they got some more anger in them, but I haven't I haven't gone there.
No. I mean, that,
Yeah.
and so what I'm saying is that you can actually, from 63, will be a fine project, maybe even a book project later on, if you want to take it that way, is to look at King in 1963, I Have a Dream, and do a rhetorical trajectory, or in this case, you can show a holy anger trajectory. By the time he gets to 68, he's saying America might go to hell, So, he's like, I have a dream, and then all of a sudden, America might go to hell. So that would be a nice trajectory to show and to demonstrate how the anger builds with that as well. So, Doc Stewart, you got your hand up.
And also, Allie, Bernice King has taken that Elijah mantle, and if you look at her first work, Hard Questions, Hard Answers, she addresses some of that rage, and I'm not saying it needs to be added to it or something like that, but perhaps to shape more of what Dr. Johnson is saying, that he passed that those latter speeches and intent when she became of age and is developing her voice. You hear a lot of that resonance echo, not only from him, but the works of her mother also.
Thank you.
Questions, comments? Rohan, I just want to encourage and also just encourage you as well. You're doing important work. I have been, people who know me have known that I've been on the forefront of getting people to look at the rhetoric of Black sermons and the rhetorical efficacy of those sermons, and moving away from not getting away, but just moving slightly away from the how-to preach books and, what to say and how to say it, and actually studying the textual examples that we left. Same thing that Dr. Stewart is doing when she transcribes a YouTube video or whatever, getting into the text. What are we saying? Why do we like these sermons? What can they offer us in way of pedagogy, in way of methodology? So I want to encourage you to continue to do that work that you're doing as well too. All right, Daniel, Dr. Stewart wrote in the chat he was impressed with the presentation, but he said, I asked too late, but would like to hear how Dr. Stewart's research questions evolved. So how did your research questions come about?
Because I was sitting with, struggling with the maintain. And when I sought to maintain, that was my tradition of hanging on, to maintaining what is. And then I was like, absolutely not. Everything about a liberative theology is to transform. And womanist transforms, and Black theology transform, and Murista theology transform, and our a liberation theology for the poor transforms. And so it just like stirred up in my shanana, if you understand that term, Daniel, that maintain held the line that was not progressive. And the work and the voice that I have advances something that is progressive and liberative, as opposed to maintenance. I'm not a maintenance kind of a person. It's like what gives new life, what breathes energy. And so I had that's one of the biggest places where I think it struck me.
I'm coming at it from Comp Ret. I'm like Ali. I'm in Comp Ret. I'm in first year writing actually. So I'm actually like I'm mainly here to learn just for where I'm at in my thing. But I was actually curious like like in your writing process, how did it actually like what were the actual things where because it was very interesting the way you actually changed, the nouns and verbs in your if that makes sense and your research questions. I think that's kind of what I meant. But I didn't mean it. It was so I've learned so much from all
Oh,
three of them.
but that's okay. Revision. When I teach my students, I always say your first version is your worst version. You have to revise. Every good writing is through revision. And as much as I edit dissertations through my I write solutions through my consulting firm. However, I have editors for my work. I never sit and think that I do the work and therefore I'm the physician, so I don't need a physician. You need a physician. So your best writing comes out of revision. And there will come a time where you hit submit. And so I'm not saying revise it until it's watered down, but revise it until you till you aim and hit your bullseye as close as you can get it. And then you can go back to the the shooting range and do more work as a later work if necessary. But don't land on your first version of your work.
Mm-hmm.
Look for revisions, look for objective readers and interdisciplinary readers, because we can hear others hear what we're saying and what we're not saying.
That's awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, Rohan.
All right. There any other questions? Any other comments?
Ali asked about my writing pedagogy and ideas coming out of this project. The pedagogy or the style of teaching that comes for me is oh my goodness, and Rohan just left. But when Rohan said spiritual knowing, the embodied voice and the embodied being, I think would be my greatest pedagogy. When I teach my students, in particularly writing for ministry, I challenge them to write to their congregations and write what has not been written for them. And what has not been written for you is probably for you to write for us. Yeah.
I'm curious, the linguist side of you pointed to a lot of those like very linguistics based rhetorical strategies. Do you are those things that you teach in this in the writing for ministry? Um, so that makes sense. Like well, for example, strategic ambiguity or
Okay, for instance, in strategic ambiguity, if a student is writing a litany, I am not opposed to if your first voice is Father God, but somewhere within there, can you shift to Mother God as the speaker? Can you shift to she, her, and hers as opposed to he, him, and his? Can you? And the more we do that, alternating that ambiguity around feminine, masculine, I think that begins to till the soil. So when we go into hearing or studying other languages where there is not the binary, or if you look at Jewish cultures where there are six genders, and then you incorporate those or introduce that knowledge to your congregants, to your audience, and to your scholarship, you again are working around the linguistic ambiguity. And then as a poet, oh, I'm going to bring you some metaphors that are divine and that are expansive.
My.
Exactly, Thomas, exactly. And one of the ways you could do that, Allie, and that I do with my congregation, it particularly in hymns, if they're not talking about Jesus as him, Him, I always instruct and ask the congregation to use God. And where instead of like, he's the source of my strength, no, God is. God is. Use God as opposed to our our predilection to lean into the he. He hears your prayers. God hears your prayers.
All right. Any other questions? We still got a few more minutes before we break. Tom just put something in the chat. Yeah. The difficulty is often that the audience doesn't understand that he, him, and they, etc., are metaphors rather than literal descriptions.
And that's where I think Rohan's work comes in, where we have to be intentional in sharing that knowledge. Explicitly share that knowledge, as well as sharing the knowledge as to why you're choosing the ambiguous language or you're choosing the neutered language. Yeah. It has to be taught. It just can't always be caught. It has to be taught.
Well, all right. Any other questions, comments? This is good. This is a great, great start with the works in progress. All right. I'm checking. Okay. If there is nothing else, let us take a break and we will be back for the second panel, which starts at 10:30 Central Standard Time. We have 3 presenters as well, and I am excited about what I'm about to hear. And we will be led and facilitated by Dr. Thomas First, who is in the Zoom room. All right. And so let's take a break and we will return.
Can I have the presenter stay on for just a minute so I can just check on some logistical things?
Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you. It was awesome.
Dr.